Hey, what's up, everybody? Championship Leadership. I'm excited today. We got Jace Mattinson from Austin, Texas, Clark Sheffield from New York, and was just on their podcast, The Millionaires Unveiled, and excited to have you guys. Thanks for taking some time today, especially with everything that's going on with coronavirus right now. I really appreciate it.
Hey,
Yeah,
I
thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first questions I like to ask to kick this show off is the name of the podcast is Championship Leadership. So I'd love to hear, from both of you guys, what does that mean to you when you hear championship leadership?
Yeah, I think championship leadership just means being able to show up, especially in times like this. I just went through an experience where we got 450 employees and stuff like this happens. And I obviously haven't been through a pandemic like this, and everybody looked to me like, hey, man, like, what are we doing? And me and
Yeah.
one other guy kind of run the company, and we had a lot of employees, and we're an essential business. So staying up, showing up for everybody, kind of leading the way. And even though the times are uncertain, you got to kind of be that champion, be that one that rises to the occasion.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Especially right now, like you said, it's unlike anything that any of us have experienced up until now. So yeah, powerful. Clark, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think, one thing that stood out, first of all, I think in a sense it kind of changes if you're working for a small or a big company,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I think the overall principles are the same. You lead by example, you have a strong ethic, you're humble, you're honest, you're driven, right? I think in everything Jay said, right? Leading in kind of perilous times a little bit. But I think in small business too, and that's what I've started to see the last few years, I think it's being willing to help whatever's needed, right? To kind of help grow the company or help grow the team or help things move forward. Jason and I often joke, it's kind of funny. We both kind of work in small business. And so the silly things like replacing the toilet paper, taking out the trash, sweeping the floor. It's unbelievable when you work in a small business, right? That nobody really has that responsibility, but the amount of few people that step up to do that
Yeah.
I mean, that's one example, but I think that transfers into your work ethic, right? I think that transfers into who's going to take charge, who's going to step up, who's willing to do things that are outside of their job description. And so you kind of see that in a small business, right? It's so easy to step up and stand out if you want to. And I think the champion leaders do.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe talk a little bit about it. I think, like Jace, you were talking a little bit about what's going on right now, and I'm a coach, and we have a year-long mastermind with probably 40 to 50 entrepreneurs, business owners, and all the conversations are the same, right? Kind of just talking about exactly what you guys are talking about is like, no one's been through this before, but we're all going through it, and we're all having to figure it out, especially as leaders inside of our companies, inside of our lives, our families. The championship leaders are going to stand up, and yeah, it's difficult, it's uncertain, but we really have no other choice than to just continue to show up every day and be there with everyone else, right?
Yeah, and let me just kind of piggyback a little bit off of what Jay said. In times like this, I think people don't know necessarily what to do, right? Ourselves included, right? And obviously for every company it's different, and every company there's a different dynamic. But and I think it translates into normal life and normal business when we don't have situations like this, right? It's easy to see, and again, certainly in a small business where you have a smaller team, when you're trying to figure out a solution to a problem, the people that stand up and offer insights and offer ways to get around it or ways to achieve it, right? It's so easy to see who's engaged. And so that to me is another element of championship leadership, somebody that will put the time in, will put the energy in to try and figure out how to solve a problem. So right now with this Corona stuff, I don't think people necessarily know, or maybe people are starting to figure it out over the last week or two, the best way to solve it, right? The right direction. But I think the leaders are the ones that step up and just give ideas. Hey, how about trying this? How about trying that? What if we did this? What if we did that? That to me is leadership, somebody that's engaged enough to throw out ideas and to give some input.
Yeah. Jace.
Yeah, I would just add to that, as we've kind of been discussing the championship leadership and, we're going through this pandemic. I think a lot of it comes down to preparation too. I think, there's various things that I've been through in my life that I feel like, yeah, they aren't nearly as severe as this, but have prepared, for this type of situation, be able to make decisions and be able to make decisions quickly to one, be able to admit that, hey, maybe that was a bad decision and that's okay. We're going to pivot and go this way. And I think regardless of the situation that we're in now, but just in general, being a leader, being able to admit that, hey, maybe I did make a bad decision and I'm going to change that. I'm going to learn from that bad decision that I made and make sure that I don't make that again and pivot and go to a different direction.
Yeah. 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 I mean, preparedness, that's huge. And it's definitely, yeah, I mean, great leaders are always, hopefully they're learning from the experiences that they've had, and hopefully you're bringing in the team and, maybe others that have experienced others' experiences as well to get through trying times like this is absolutely essential right now. So what's, maybe tell us a little bit more about you guys and how you came together, how you've gotten to where you are today. What's the path that you guys are on right now, for the listeners here to hear a little bit about your story and the path that you've been on.
Yeah, sure. I'll start. So Jason and I both went to BYU undergrad, both did church service missions in Bulgaria, and that's kind of how we became acquainted with each other. Weren't there at the same time, but knew some of the same people, and so it overlapped in that sense. And we went back and met at school. We both started our careers in Big Four, actually lived together in Dallas for a little bit, and then have just stayed in touch since then. I live in New York, Jace lives in Texas. And so then a couple of years ago, as we stayed in contact and remained friends and kind of talked about all things life really and business and personal finance, we started a podcast called Millionaires Unveiled. And the goal there was just to interview millionaires and see how they invest, see what they do with their money, how they made their money, and what they're doing now. And so since then, we've continued to remain and grow a strong friendship. So I lead the finance and accounting team for a multifamily real estate investment group here in New York, where we buy and self-manage multifamily assets. And that's kind of my current day job. And we do the podcast on the side.
Great. What's what prompted the podcast? Like, I know, you mentioned it a little bit, but what was really the thing that made you guys come together and be like, hey, let's go out and talk to these millionaires? Was it maybe a little bit of a like selfish research project so that you could kind of get the insights from a bunch of people that have been there and kind of going where you want to go? Or what was the big thought behind that?
Yeah, I think that was a little aspect of it. Clark and I had grown up. We knew what our dad's portfolios looked like. And,
Mm-hmm.
our dads were kind enough to share that with us. And we always joke that we were kind of some of the only siblings that did get that knowledge to the level of detail that our dad shared with us. And, we just kind of looked around and it was, some people were blogging a little bit, throwing stuff out there, but for the most part, it was a lot of information that just hadn't been put out there. And we just kind of saw an opportunity. Hey, maybe we should interview these guys, put them together, because it'd be real interesting to go back in 2008 and see how portfolios changed or people's mindset changed or what they did differently and kind of track them over the years. And so that's kind of the crux of what we thought about putting together. And obviously we're in its infancy. Clark and I are both young, so plan on doing this for a long time, being able to kind of put this data together and track some of these millionaires, year over year over year over year to kind of see what changes. And when, we're right in the middle of one now, it'll be interesting to see how portfolios change in what we'll call the pandemic of 2020.
Yeah.
And see, in 5 years how this all plays out and be able to kind of, we feel like we really learn a lot from each other and what other people do. And so that's one part of it. And then the other part is, but everybody loves hearing great stories. And so we've been able to put a bunch of these stories together, and our older listeners just love hearing. They don't really care about how, Johnny invests. I've got
Right.
my investment strategy. I'm in my 50s already, but man, I love hearing somebody else's success story of how they made it, what their struggles were. and how they kind of ended out on top.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, thank you for sharing that. Who are, like, maybe talk a little bit about who have been some of the guests that you guys have interviewed that, that have stood out to you, maybe from a, you know, if there are any that have stood out from that, like, leadership standpoint of, and maybe what are some of the things that really stood out to you about them inside of that?
Well, certainly you, right? That's number one.
All right. Now we're talking.
I think one that definitely stood out was David, episode 100, who is worth about 100 million. I think you can just see a totally different way of thinking, a total different energy, a total different kind of way of leadership, and just a way of success. So that's one that stood out to me. But I think all of them in their own rights, right? I mean, most everybody we interview has a net worth of over $1 million. So in some sense, at least financially, right, they've been successful. How they prioritize their life, their career is totally separate, and what they do and how they earn their money is separate, and how they spend it is obviously different. But it's been fascinating to listen to all of them. And I think there's a lot of things that overlap, right? A lot of them are very intentional and driven about their lives, right? Not just about their money, but also their family situations, about their careers. And then one thing that Jace touched on earlier, I know I'm kind of changing gears here on your question, but I've been reading Ray Dalio's book, Principles, right? And if you want to listen to or read or listen to something about leadership, it's phenomenal, some of the principles, right, that he shares. And one of them that Jace mentioned was, you know, being able to admit that you're wrong, right? And that's what he hits on over and over again, is putting yourself around smart people that you'll listen to, right? You don't have to take their opinion, but being able to put yourself in a situation where, you know, people are going to disagree with you, and then being able to say, okay, you're right. Because I think, and I don't notice it, I mean, maybe Jace does, I think most of the people that we interview are pretty humble, right? And they come on our show because they want to help people, and they're happy to share their story. And when we ask what their mistakes are, a lot of them are so open with their mistakes. But I think a lot of either people I hear on other shows or people you meet in life, right, it's hard for us to admit our mistakes and to say, I goofed up, or take responsibility when something doesn't go right. But that's one trait, going back to your question now, that's one trait that's stood out to me as we've interviewed them, is they've been humble enough to say, look, yeah, I made this mistake, and this is what I wish I would have done. I would have done better. And they're humble enough then to seek advice, right? Hey, what should I be doing? Or I reached out to a friend, and this is what he told me what to do, and I listened. So that's one trait that stood out to me.
Yeah. Thank you. What about you, Jace?
Yeah, as far as millionaires go, there's one that we had on, and you know, he was a janitor, and I think, you know, typically we look at that profession as something that's not, you know, hey, they don't make a lot of money, or like, you know, we realize how important they are. And this particular individual had so much passion and pride for what he did. It just was really refreshing to see this individual have so much pride and passion for being a janitor, and how he had been able to use that to actually be leverage for his success, and kind of get to that millionaire status and do all these different things that he had kind of put together. And it was like, you know, it's not that like there's this totem pole in society of, hey, that's a profession that's honorable and that one's not. Like, this guy, I guarantee he did his job better than probably 95% of people in America do their individual jobs. And he was the janitor at the elementary school in a West Coast state. And it was phenomenal to just listen to him. And because of that interview, like, I totally look at what I do and some of the things that other people that I know do totally differently. And this guy chose that, and he just kicks butt at it, and it's awesome to see.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's really awesome. Thank you for sharing that too as well. It's fun to hear those stories and all the different people and where they come from, and, you know, like you said, kind of the perceptions maybe that you could have about certain people, or depending on what they're doing and in life. But it's also great to just be able to learn from everyone else and continue to, you know, communicate that message like you guys are doing. So, what is a vision for you guys? Where are you guys looking to go together? whether it's with the podcast, or I know we talked before the show, I think, about, you know, what you guys are doing together on the business side of things as well. Like what's the impact you guys want to make? What's the vision that you guys have for what you guys got going on together as business partners?
Yeah, first of all, I think it continues to be figured out, right? I think
Yeah.
if most everybody in life is honest with themselves, right, they continue to figure it out. One of the things we're starting to do is buy some multifamily real estate and raise money and do that. As we've talked to a lot of these millionaires, it's kind of one of the goals they have is passive income or diversification of their investments or their assets. So that's one thing we continue to look into, and try and get some multifamily stuff under our belt and grow that a little bit. Obviously, we want to continue to grow the podcast, both because it's interesting to help people and, you know, obviously, hopefully for it to go somewhere. Eventually, we'd like to put all the stories into a book or some sort of collection where, you know, little things we're doing as well, revamping the website to kind of help our engagement and stuff. But business-wise, it's obviously to continue to grow the podcast and then some multifamily real estate or other investments that we deem to be successful on the side.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add into that from your side, Jace?
No, I think, you know, long term, we definitely want, like Clark mentioned, come out with a book. And, you know, we've had a few millionaires interested in kind of being part of a group where they can kind of openly ask questions because they can't talk to their neighbor or their family about, you know, certain issues. Everybody deals with different issues, you know, different levels of wealth and strategic planning and stuff like that. So we've kind of discussed putting something together like that, and facilitating that for some of them. A lot of people want to have conversations with these millionaires. Obviously, like we protect identities.
Sure.
But there have been some that have been, you know, hey, I'm totally willing to talk to whoever, answer questions or whatever. I don't care to remain anonymous. So we've talked about trying to facilitate some of that, you know, discussion, because, you know, we really have an opportunity to make a lot of connections. People really resonate with, you know, profession that somebody else or path that somebody else has taken that they're on that's similar. And so trying to make those connections for people is something that we hope to do in the future as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, there's a unique opportunity there. I think, you know, part of the reason, you know, with our clients that the mastermind that we have, I mean, I just think of that as kind of similar to what you guys are thinking of putting together a group where, you know, common interests can come together and have some open conversations where, you know, back home, they don't necessarily maybe have that. So that's awesome. We're getting close to the end here, but I do want to ask this question really to both you guys, because I'm sure you both have unique experiences and stories. But what's like a critical moment or defining moment that you guys have had? I think championship leaders, you know, we all have them and we have many of them. But in those moments, like, you got to have the vision and you got to have some courage to make the decision that you know is right for you, kind of that fork in the road moment. And obviously you guys have made the decision you did that has you where you are today, but had you not, like, you know, life could be very different for you. So is there a moment that sticks out to both of you guys that you could share? I think the listeners, many of them might be in this moment right now. And it's just good to hear other people that have been in similar situations and have had the courage to make the decision they did and then actually see that it worked out for them. So is there a moment for either of you that comes to mind right away that you could share?
Yeah, I've got two actually. One was from my childhood, and it was when I got cut from the All-Star baseball team, and that was just a defining moment for me to, one, double down on the sport that I was better at in basketball and really excel at that, and that has always stuck with me because, you know, I cried and I cried and I cried, and my parents were, you know, hey, it's going to be okay. But I was just devastated because I really wanted to make that All-Star. And they ended up going to the Little League World Series. And I felt like I got jaded on that opportunity.
Yeah.
And the whole reason that I didn't make it was because the coach said that I wasn't aggressive enough.
Oh, wow.
So I've always kind of it's kind of always stuck with me to be aggressive, to, you know, and make aggressive mistakes. I think the other one was, you know, I had all sorts of plans to go out to California. I was going out there with PwC, and a couple of things kind of happened in my life, and I ended up just completely rearranging plans and headed up in Dallas and was like, what am I doing here? This is totally outside the box. And, you know, that led to Clark and I staying a summer together. And some of the relationships that I built there have been phenomenal. I ended up meeting my wife there, and just so many little things. I look at that one decision to be able to take a little bit of a risk, go to an area that I'd never been to, knew nobody, and kind of completely led to building the life that we have now.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's the Little League, and they went to the World Series, to the actual Little League World Series. The big show.
Yep, the big show, man. I could have been there maybe if I was a little more aggressive.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's powerful to hear though that you took that, and you know, I mean, still today that sticks with you and who you are. So thank you. Yeah. Clark, what about you?
Yeah, I don't know if there's one that I can say, hey, that changed the whole trajectory, right? We ask that question sometimes to our millionaires, and it's pretty amazing some of the answers you get. You know, sometimes they do have big turnaround moments of like, in that moment, like I knew that's when I was never going to live that way again or whatever. I think the two things that stand out to me are, one, when I was doing my church service mission, I think it caused me to think more just in general about what I want with my life. And at that time, it was what should I study? And I ultimately went back and studied accounting, which has now opened up tremendous doors for me professionally and other career-wise, right? And then obviously helped me have some good connections. So that was one. And I think that's just because I was receptive to asking people what they did and kind of hearing it out and thinking about just taking a little moment. You know, I think sometimes we get so bogged down in life and it's busy in everything, right? Media and cell phones and family and friends, and they can be great things. But, you know, I watched Bill Gates' documentary, and he does these think weeks where he kind of puts all that aside and goes and just kind of has like a week of thinking and peace. And I think, I don't know that that's necessarily necessary, but I think when we kind of slow down a little bit and think about ourselves and our lives and our families and whatever else is important, it kind of causes us to get a moment of clarity. And so that was one. And then number two, I'd say, was a few years ago where I kind of became just more intentional with my time, more intentional with what I was bringing into my life, right? Trying to listen to more podcasts, read good books. Jason and I kind of were picking up our conversations, and that's where you kind of catch the bug, right? When you start listening and hanging out with successful people, it makes you want to be that way. And so I think one turning point for me, you know, as maybe silly as it sounds, was just choosing to start engaging in these type of things, right? Whether it was podcasts, books, conversations, and then you catch the bug. You get kind of addicted to it, right? In the sense of trying to be a high achiever and accomplishing goals. And that can happen for anybody at any time, right? You don't have to be 25 or 55 to do that.
Yep.
But I think it causes you to just kind of elevate your game a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Thank you for that. What is one final question for both of you guys? One or two things that, you know, if the listeners were to implement into their life, it would help move them forward today in their life. You know, guiding principles, things that you live by, or whatever it might be. One or two things that you could share each with the listeners to help them move forward today.
I think Clark just hit on a big one, and that's goal setting. And it's not just goal setting, but it's reevaluating those every single day. I used to think it was kooky. I'll be the first to admit this, that looking at your goals and placing things on, you know, in a vision for yourself, but doing that daily, it's been amazing what I've been able to accomplish. And there's nothing that I've fundamentally changed on a greater scale than reviewing those kinds of things daily.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, totally agree there. And then I think kind of just what I mentioned is just kind of choosing to be all in, right? And I think that can be goal setting. I think that can be putting yourself around successful people. I think that can be joining a mastermind or a coaching group like yours, right? Where you're around people and being helped along the way. I think that can be making a goal to read 12 books a year or 15 books or 10 books or whatever, right? Something. I think just making that choice to say, hey, I'm going to improve myself, and then do it. And you know, I set goals, and Jason and I talk about them frequently, but there's still some days or sometimes, right, where you kind of, you kind of fall back, or maybe you're not as good as you should be, or you get home and it's late at night and you're tired and you should stay up and do this. And I think we all do that, right? But staying on track and just kind of trying to be even just a step more intentional, I think makes you so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It looks like we lost Jace.
I think his battery just died.
His connection was,
he texted me. He's like, let me answer this first.
Okay. Well, good thing we got to the end. So, what's some ways that we can, follow you guys, find your podcast, or whatever else that you got that you might be putting out there today?
Yeah, sure. The podcast is Millionaires Unveiled, millionairesunveiled.com. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Pandora, everything that people listen to podcasts on. And so that's how you can find us. And email is millionairesunveiled@gmail.com.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate you guys being here today. Thank you so much for taking some time. Had a great conversation. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. And anybody who wants to listen to our conversation with Nate, we'll be launching that here. We're recording this at the end of March. So probably the next month or two, we'll be launching our interview with him. So take a listen to that. It was a great interview.
Appreciate it, man. Have a good day.
Right, thank you. You too.
Yep.